Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. In today's edition of Friday Morning Ramblings, I'm going to talk about compost, filling beds, whatever else comes to mind as I'm walking around. Compost. So I have a lot of green grass in here, put a lot in over the last week, and I'm probably not going to do a lot of videos this year on composting because I did a couple last year, but the bottom line isn't how quickly you can make it. It's really just getting started. So that's what I want to encourage you today, is that if you haven't started composting, get some space set up. You can use the designs that you see here and just start collecting materials. Like I have leaves way back there on the right, leaves in the bins there that you can't see that I've been using and mixing with the grass in there. In fact, I made this yesterday and the temperature is almost up to 120 degrees. This is going to get started. It's going to break down a lot, but it's going to take a couple months, maybe longer, to get ready. And here's the issue that I was looking at, compost in 60 days or 90 days or whatever. If you're trying to do that, you probably don't have enough materials around to make anything quantity-wise it's really worth collecting. It's like, all of a sudden you decide you want compost in 30 days or 60 days, and then you find all these leaves and grass and throw it together. You don't get a whole lot. My point. I'm filling raised beds, and as we're walking around I'll talk about this. This is compost, all the stuff that I was making last year all the way up to about here. It's about 75% done, but it's an awesome bottom filler for these 100-gallon, 150-gallon fabric pots I'm filling, some metal raised beds, and it's saving me a ton of money. You're not going to be able to make that in 60 days or 30 days. So I'm just going to encourage people to start collecting the materials, get the composting process done. So, as long as we stay alive and kicking, the compost is going to show up, which, is probably more important in the long run. That's compost that's completely finished. I'm using that on top of my beds, and when I'm putting transplants out, mixing it into the soil. Just get started. Wherever you have a space, that would be great. Looking back, just FYI, I would have liked to have built these 2 feet higher so that I can get in more and add in more materials. And it has a roof on there. I would have liked to have done maybe half of a roof to keep some of the water off. But when it gets really hot, June, July, August here, this dries out quickly. And one of the keys, and probably the biggest key to composting, is keeping the pile moist. So I'm keeping too much rainwater off of there. I'll work on that later. And in these 2 bins are the leaves that I've been mixing with the grass. About 2 parts green, 1 part brown. It does smell a little bit more, but it breaks down quicker and I can deal with it. This is just a leaf pen, basically, a leaf bin. These are all leaves that were filled up to here. So you can collect all your leaves. I'm going to have plenty of carbon to add to my green grass clippings over the season. Still have to get out here, clean it up some more, but this will be a working project. And I've always, said, make sure you look back and enjoy what you're accomplishing, give yourself credit. Pretty soon, this will be done. This is my Muscadine or Muscadine trellis. And one tip, if you're growing grapevines or the Muscadines, so this one grew too long, it grew through the fencing. Try and keep all your vines on the outside of your fencing, because if you look in here, it's these little spaces to keep animals out and stuff like that. I had them all weaved in here, and as these expand and get big, this will cut into the vines, and it just doesn't make sense. So this winter, I pruned out most of them, and you can see that they're on the outside, except for ones that were too big. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a hole around this to give it more space so it doesn't mess up the vine. But keep them on the outside of the vine, and then you can weave them through an arch if you want, or you can just wire them to your fence and do what you wish with them. One area that I might do some videos on is the compost tumblers. The compost that I made with the wood pellets and the alfalfa are all ready to go. They look really good. So this is something most people can do if you have the space, is just set up a tumbler. What I just showed you may not have the space for that. Oh, let me show you one area over here. This is where I'm growing mushrooms, and this is pretty cool. It's working. Brussels sprouts in here, egg fabric to keep that crazy white butterfly off. These are oyster mushrooms, and the experiment worked. So I should have oyster mushrooms everywhere. And here are some that are actually ready to pick, although it looks like something was eating them. I'm not sure what eats them. I'll have to figure that out. But the oyster mushrooms are coming out. In 3 days, this will be huge. I'm gonna have oyster mushrooms. And the whole space in here is all set up for different kinds of mushrooms. The wine caps and the oysters I talked about before. Okay, let's go into the garden. This is my no-dig garden. That's asparagus that I started from seed indoors last year. So this is technically the second year. I'm not gonna harvest anything because I want these all to grow 4 feet tall. These are the spears that you would basically eat. I want them to grow 4 feet tall, fern out, strengthen the root system, and I'll start harvesting next year. But I wanted a little asparagus patch right in there. The peppers, I always do that. The potatoes are coming up. They're looking good, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this harvest goes. This is the area that I was just talking about with the compost. There are 24 potatoes in there, 12 about 4 inches, 6 inches from the bottom, and then another 4 to 6 inches, another 12. And this is, you know, the continuation of the great potato experiment. I want to see how many potatoes I can get in a 100-gallon pouch. I sell these at my seed shop, of course. But the idea is to really use the space to maximize potato production. Instead of just putting, you know, maybe 10 or 12 at the bottom, vining it all the way up, backfilling, I'm just loading the potatoes in. We'll see what happens. What I was able to do is 2 inches of the mulch that wasn't, of the compost that wasn't completed went into that bottom. I didn't use as much in these because the potatoes are growing into it. But 2 inches of that compost that wasn't fully finished, and then different soils that the potatoes like going all the way up. But where I really saved money was, this is going to be a sweet potato bed, so I don't need to worry about what's down at the bottom. So almost a third of that is that compost that wasn't fully finished. It saves you a lot of money, and the plants are going to love that. It's going to break down, worms are going to like it, soil microbiology, and then you just fill the better stuff as you're coming up. There's going to be looser soil on top. This is all going to be sweet potatoes. The vines are rooting in my house right now. I will link the video that shows you how to do that if you want. And then I'm going to be using that wire ladder mesh, 3 pieces here, to really grow the vines up it and control everything so that I can have vines growing everywhere. Hopefully I get great sweet potato growth. Trick that I'm using in there is I'm adding phosphorus. I'm using basically it's mineral phosphate. It's not technically organic, although I consider it organic, but it's mined, and the extra phosphorus should help the sweet potatoes grow, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't want to just tore my pants on there. Got to fix that sharp edge. I was going to talk about fertilizers, but I'll save that for another video. We tend to get too caught up into the organic fertilizers as the only things that are good for you. That's not true. Compost, that's the #1 organic fertilizer. That's what we should all be using. Stuff that you start buying after that, really, you can buy a mix of mostly organic, some of the chemical types. I'll explain that in another video. Just wanted to show you the garlic is looking great. This is soft neck garlic that was put in March. I did a video on that. Onions are looking good. Feeding them made a difference. I think I talked about that in the last video. Whenever you're putting down your new plants for the spring, give them some nitrogen. Water soluble. I use fish emulsion. They really appreciate that to get started. Then you kind of cut back on that depending on what the variety of vegetable is you're growing, and maybe they want something else, maybe they don't need anything else. But give them that drink of nitrogen in the beginning. It really helps them take off. This is going to be the root pouch fabric pot garden. It's looking pretty good. All kinds of greenery coming up. It really looks nice. I put in some lettuces, peppers. I have potatoes growing in there. This side was everything here I planted by seed or started in the house. They're looking good. I added in just those bamboo poles, even though there's a fence there. You really want to trellis up your peas. They're hollow stemmed, and they'll go up the stakes, and then they'll, you know, be directed to the fence and stuff like that. Some of the French breakfast radishes are probably ready to be picked. I'll be picking those soon. Very happy about the way this looks. I think it looks cool. I'll have plenty of greens in about a week or so. I'll be grabbing different bunches from here. I have some tomato plants in now. It's going to be 36 degrees Wednesday night. I've got a plan to protect them, but besides that, all my nights have been 40 degrees or higher. Still a little cool for your tomato plants because they like that 50-degree soil, 70+ degree days. If the soil's too cold, they might look a little yellow, a little purple. They don't do much. That's because of the soil temperature. Getting used to the ag fabric. Things are progressing nicely in there. All the cilantro is coming up, and I encourage you to put cilantro in waves every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, especially in the summer because it tends to flower more quickly. That's all cilantro. This is a rhubarb, which I didn't know what it really did because I put it in last year, but it's going to have some sort of beautiful flower head, which I assume is normal. But I'm going to just let that grow this year, not harvest it yet until it's fully established. I mean, things look pretty good. Everything is coming up. Spinach looks great. Remember, I'm overcrowding stuff, and that's fine unless you're growing a specimen plant or you're really growing something to get to full size. You can put them more closely together. What I'll be doing this weekend is clearing out all the beds that are left. I've been harvesting these Brussels sprout blooms and flowers from the kales and stuff that overwintered. They're all going to come out. They make a great stir fry, by the way. Romaine lettuce is looking good. Going to be putting in my bean plants. There's my trash bin wheelbarrow. Going to be putting in green beans, other plants that tend to like warmer weather, but they will be protected in the soil. They will start their thing and they'll really come out strong. And how I kind of learned that was the bean seeds that fell into, you know, the paths, the sunflower seeds. You know, you consider those tender annuals, but some of the sunflowers are already germinating. Last year they dealt with frost that was about 30 degrees, and then the beans did the same thing. They followed along. So following the exact timing on packets or what you read online isn't necessarily true because it can vary in your zone. Some of these plants are a lot more hardy than you think. Other transplants that I put in, arugula over to the right, and then I have that's bib lettuce, spinach, types of endive, mustard greens, beets are coming up. Everything is doing what it's supposed to do. This is the time I really like walking in the garden and just looking at things and appreciate what's growing, appreciate nature. These are all coreopsis that I'm going to be keeping that seeded over. You know, I might dig them up and move them. Flowers in here to bring in pollinators. This is a apple tree, 4 different varieties grafted onto there. Trying to prune it the best I can, but I don't know what I'm doing. Onions looking good. You know, the experiment that was going on. Just to, you know, if you're watching this series, these were seeded at the same time as the plants back there, same exact varieties. They were protected with that polycarbonate, and look how much better they look back there compared to the ones that dealt with the cold and the frost. So you can use that polycarbonate and really start your seeds early. This will be all cleaned up. That'll be pulled out. I've been eating the spinach out of there. I'm going to be growing my contest tomato there. If you want to go to my Facebook group, Callie Kim is over there. It's Gardening Coast to Coast on Facebook. We're going to be doing a contest. Kevin from Epic Gardening is going to participate too. You're all welcome to participate. It's very low key, but you can check that out. It's the Facebook group, Gardening Coast to Coast. I'll be doing a video on how I set up this soil for growing larger tomatoes. It's not much different, but you definitely want to use fertilizers. And all right, I'll talk about the chemical fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers, first of all, everything's a chemical. Your organic fertilizers tend to be blood, bone, manures, feather, beaks, all kinds of stuff, animal parts, just ground up. That's fine, it works. They aren't better than some of the chemical fertilizers. Your plants can't tell the difference, and I'll keep it short. The chemical fertilizers used on mass scale that I've talked about before will kill out your soil life, cause problems. They figured this all out in the 40s and the 50s when they were doing it on large scale. Those farmers also didn't add in compost and didn't add in other organic amendments. So you can use the chemical water solubles strategically It's not going to harm your plants. It's not going to harm you. It's not going to harm your soil. That's basically the message. And I do that sometimes. Like I might give the peppers a boost of something that's a higher phosphorus, maybe potassium, maybe a chemical type. It's not going to kill anything. Don't feel like you have to be 100% anything, in my opinion. Compost, organic fertilizers, the chemical types if you need them. And with the chemical types, some of them are, mined, out of mines, out of old ocean basins. They're easily made. They're not chemical salts. They're not made from petroleum products. You just have to know what you're using. So I have asparagus coming up in here too. So some of that has to get harvested. This is the third year. The stalks to the left are a little too big, but that one on the right is perfect. And they're just starting to pop. And what I discovered was this area stays a lot more shady and cold than where I showed you that first asparagus in the no-dig garden. So that's really sprung up like last week, 10 days ago. These are taking longer because this ground just stays much colder. In retrospect, it probably would have been wise to put the asparagus over on that side, but that's how life goes. I've got my frost protection equipment out, so to speak, just waiting for Wednesday night. I'm going to cover up a lot of stuff. Dropped in some cherry tomatoes, put in worm castings. That's Vermistera. That's a company that I'm affiliated with. And you can see that they're struggling a little bit because the temperatures are still getting into the 40s. If you look right in there, you can see a lot of tomatoes coming up from tomatoes that fell. So tomato seeds, can be put out early. You just have to watch for the hard frosts. And they don't look so bad, but I'm trying to get a jump here on the cherry tomatoes. This is where the cherry tomato trellis is going to go. And I'm cutting back to 4 varieties on the right side. The blueberries are forming. Things are looking pretty good. I want to show you the hop plants because they have taken off from nothing when I was away to the point that I had to just pull them off the fence, and I'm going to try and get them to go up these telescoping poles. So I think that will work out. I think that will look cool. But hop plants are pretty invasive. So you really want to put them in a place where you can easily rip them up and manage them, or they will take over the entire space. But they look pretty good. So I'm going to try my hand again at maybe brewing some beer with herbs and different stuff coming out of the garden. Of course, the hops plants. Strawberries are looking good. I mean, everything is just taking off now. I expect in the next 7 days, 14 days, there'll be a lot to harvest. Here's a good example of the muscadines. These are on the other side of the property, of course, and you can see, I don't know how to prune these, to be honest with you, so I'm not going to give you any technical ideas on pruning, but I've pulled them all out of the fence, and they are just clipped there now with wire, so that I can move these and do what I need to do with them. Eventually they will spread out through here. It'll look pretty cool, but you just don't want to weave them in and out of there. That's like your first thought is, hey, this will work really well, but they will get really thick and it will harm the plant. A couple more examples. My idea is to build some sort of trellis right over here on the east side, and it will come down this way. And we'll see how that goes. You can also use that kind of trellising and those vines to keep deer out. The vertical garden looks good. Everything's coming in. Taking the time to really set up the soil with your fertilizers goes a long way. They don't need much once you do that. I'll be doing plenty of videos on there. Those are, what are they? Those are daisies in quart root pouches. They've just been sitting there. They're really doing well. Hey, look at that. That's a mustard green that started itself right in there. I guess I'll keep that. Again, another experiment. These are determinate tomatoes put out, and you can see that they're kind of yellow and beat up and they just don't look great. They've already been fed with a fertilizer, so once you feed them, don't keep overfeeding your plants. This is just temperature related. They're going to have to, just kind of hang out and shiver till the right temperatures come. These are tiny Tims. I've been actually eating tomatoes off of there, which is pretty cool. Probably eat this one after. So, April 18th, I am getting some tomatoes out of there. Let's go over to one more place. Well, two more places. These are my container potatoes, part of the experiment, growing these more in the standard way that you see online. And they're doing pretty well. So as these vines actually, well, probably maybe 2 or 3 more inches, as they get taller, I'll put more soil into there, and I'll just keep doing that as the vine grows up. And I'm going to see how many potatoes grow in the vining, basically, or the green growth, the shoots that come up, you know, from the bottom all the way up. And I don't think a whole lot will. But container potatoes, I think, are the way to go. They won't be as large as maybe you would like to see, but you'll have plenty of baby potatoes, and this little footprint will be enough for a couple of weeks, hopefully. And then I just wanted to show you some of the space where I'm growing the perennial bulbs. Lots of herbs and stuff in there. They'll all be going in places. But look how nicely they're doing. These are to the point now, you know, in about a week, if you went to a nursery or something like that, you would be paying, maybe if you're lucky, $4, but somewhere $6, $8, maybe more, for plants that are maturing like this. And these were all just, you know, put into these quart pots, or maybe they're gallon pots. Herbs, I started all indoors. That's sage. They're a little bit beat up. This is all from cold, this change in the coloring. As soon as they warm up, they'll be fine. But this is, you know, maybe a dime a plant versus paying $3.98 or something like that crazy at Home Depot or Lowe's when you're buying them at the more expensive places. Just a great way to save money. I want to show you these. The astilbes, if that's how you say it. I want to do a whole shade garden. Started these myself, and they're looking great. Save a ton of money. I hope what the Rambling series does is it just, you know, gives you some tips for your garden, but gives you the confidence not to have to just believe everything you read and see, even hear from me. Think about it. What works for your garden? What works for your budget? What makes sense? You know, figure out ways to save money, but most importantly, just have fun. You know, you don't need to start with a garden this large. If you feel like you're behind, like you didn't seed start, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, you're not behind. You have plenty of time, especially here in Maryland Zone 7. You can get started right now. You can start your tomatoes outside in seed trays. Just keep them in a shadier area like this, because if you put a seed tray up here and it gets up to 70, it dries them out so fast and it bakes the plastic. That's no good. But you could start your tomatoes and peppers outdoors right now. You know, you don't need the indoor grow lights, but don't feel like you're behind. Don't feel overwhelmed. Garden is a space for you to go out, interact with nature, have fun, grow some great vegetables. Thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com and enjoy your weekend.